Hello, welcome to Into the Fire, a Burning Coal Theater Company podcast series.
Hi, this is Jerome Davis. I'm the artistic director of Burning Coal Theater Company, and I'd like to welcome everyone to Into the Fire, the Burning Coal Theater Company podcast series on all things theatrical. Today we have not one but two special guests. These are the directors of BEING CHAKA, which will open at Burning Coal Theater Company on Thursday, March 13th and play through the 30th of the month. Chuk Obasi and Vieve are here with us today. Both of you, thanks, and thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Hey, thank you so much for having us.
I'm going to ask you, if you don't mind, to introduce yourselves and tell us what your official title is with TÉA Artistry, which is the company that's producing BEING CHAKA with Burning Coal. Chuk, do you mind starting off?
Yeah, I'll start. So yeah, Chuk Obasi. I am the co-director of BEING CHAKA and also the co-director of TÉA Artistry with Vieve.
And Vieve?
And I am Vieve Price, and I am the co-director of TÉA Artistry with Chukuma, and we are co-directing this piece together as well.
Well, I'd love to hear more about TÉA Artistry, but before I do that, I'd like to ask each of you to tell me just a little bit about yourselves. Viv, where are you from originally, and how long have you been working in theater, and how in the world did you end up in such a business?
Right. What made you?
Yeah.
So I'm originally from California. My dad was a musician, and so we moved around a ton. So I kind of claim a couple different places, including actually Raleigh. My dad has been here since 1985, I think. And so I lived here a bit then in 85 or 6, and then mostly in California, though I graduated high school there. So that's where I kind of claim as home.
Sure.
And really started doing, my real foray into theater, I did some in college, but mostly in New York. When I arrived in New York in 95, in 96, I started working with an organization called Night Star, which is actually where, not in 95, but actually where Chuk and I actually ended up coming together because we both were alumni of Night Star. So it was a theater company and theater organization that used theater for HIV prevention education and all the related issues for young people. So that's where I really started in theater, and it's grown from there.
That was a West Coast organization.
It's actually New York City.
In New York City. Okay,
yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
And Chuk, how about you?
Yeah, I am East Coast through and through. Born in Queens, raised in the Bronx, and so I spent most of my life in the Bronx. So that's what I would claim mostly. And now I live in Manhattan. So I've just been in New York my whole life, and I've been in theater since I was 13. I started out in high school doing musical theater and dance. I studied musical theater and dance in college, along with communications, which kind of all complemented each other, I thought. And then once I finished with school, I found myself, not just acting, but also writing, also directing. Night Star that Vieve mentioned, I kind of joined that company early out of college. And so I spent a lot of time with them, learned a lot in that company. But yeah, I've kind of I find myself at a place where I love, creating art from different hats, under different hats. I also do choreography. I also do poetry. I also teach. But it's all.
Do you build sets?
I don't build sets. I don't.
Oh. All right. Okay.
Yeah,
that's great.
yeah,
Now, Chuk, was there a person in your life or early on that set you on this path? Do you think somebody who was a mentor?
Mm.
Oh yeah, definitely. I definitely have mentors. I mean, it was my high school teacher who got me to try out for my first show, which was Guys and Dolls, and I was super shy back then. So he was like, "No, this will help you open up." So that there was that, and then there was
Definitely.
my college professor, Randy Kaplan, who showered me with the toughest love you can imagine. And it was a kind of love that set me straight as someone who loved to perform but didn't love to write essays and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
so she taught me that I can't cut corners, and then now I actually enjoy writing. So
Yeah. 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 A
um,
lot of artists go through that same path. I've discovered there's something about putting your thoughts down on paper, or on a computer, I guess nowadays, that just helps to clarify things. I think in people's mind. Viv, did you have a mentor early on?
I would say the what sticks out for me, and I know we keep referring to it, but it was really formative and really paramount for me, which was Nightstar, and all the creative beings in that company. And I was there from 95 to 2000, which is when I joined the Peace Corps. So I had 5 years of just being in this really collaborative, creative company of multi-hyphenate artists, because we wrote all the pieces and performed the pieces and created the songs. And
Yeah.
so it was just, and the mission. I mean, the mission to do, it was under the umbrella of HIV prevention education, but it was so much about these young people becoming who they wanted to be. And, Chuk, you talked about like getting set straight, right? Tough love and it was it was really about like, what does it take to be your full expression of a person? And part of that is staying safe, right? Part of that is making good decisions. Part of that is, and that Nightstar was all about the whole, the whole complete person, and using art to mine that and access that and evolve that. So I would say every person that I got to interact with and be with in Nightstar was really a mentor along the way.
Is that company still in existence, to your knowledge?
Alas, no, it's
Okay.
not. It is not, but it had a very good run. I think it started in the 80s and didn't and ended just not so long ago.
yeah.
I was there through the heart of all that, the from 85 to about 96, and somehow managed not to be directly affected by,
Mhm.
none of the people that I really knew or cared about um, were affected by that illness. I've since learned that some of them had it, and were
Mhm.
able to, you know, find solutions in the short term until
Mhm.
the more uh, long-lasting science discoveries came along to make their lives more like what it had been before that illness arose.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, it was a tough time, and it's really
Mhm.
lovely to hear that that theater was being used to help people to think about that. We did Larry Kramer's play The Normal Heart a few years
Mhm.
ago, which is one of my favorite pieces of writing about that. And one of the things I like about it, going back to Chuk, your idea about writing as a component of the artistic life, I guess, is that Larry Kramer wasn't really a theater person. He wasn't really a playwright, and yet
Mhm.
he wrote this just spectacularly
Mhm.
powerful, piece of drama that really, I think, changed a lot of lives. And man, did he have to fight battles, because nobody wanted to hear what he was saying
Right,
at the
right.
time. He was
Mhm.
challenging every orthodoxy within his own community, and
Mhm.
like Nightstar saved lives in the process.
Mhm. Mhm.
So
As art can do so well, really.
Viv, you sort of blew past one little detail there. You joined the Peace Corps. Is that what I heard you say?
I did join the Peace Corps in 2000. I I just felt called. I mean, as they say, they
Yeah.
call it the toughest job you'll ever love, and that oftentimes you do feel called. And I wanted to, so I actually did HIV prevention
Mhm.
in using theater in the Peace Corps. So I went to Vanuatu, which is in the South Pacific, and that was it was an amazing. It's 2.5 years, and just an amazing experience and journey, and hard, very hard, for reasons that are, everyone's like, oh gosh, no electricity, or those are the things we get used to
Yeah.
very, very quickly.
Yeah.
But being so far away and also being in just a vastly different culture, it's, it is the toughest job you'll ever love. But I refer to it a lot because it was formative, because it changed my life.
Was there a language issue there? Language barrier?
There was, but they spend quite a bit of time in the very beginning of your service teaching you the language, and it was Bislama, which is some people call it kind of a pidgin English. It's Esperanto or Esperan, yeah, Esperanto, which was sort of this. At some point, they thought, oh, this will be the lingua franca of the world, so they speak it in Papua New Guinea, in the Solomon Islands, and in Vanuatu. So there's only 3 countries I can go to and speak and be
Converse.
understood, and
Yeah.
and understand.
Yeah.
But I
Well,
did learn it. I did learn it. It does happen.
you're doing okay in the South too.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. I can understand.
Yeah.
Yes.
And when you got back, TÉA began. Is that correct?
Actually, when I got back in 2003, I went to grad school. I got a incredible graduate fellowship because I was a Peace Corps volunteer. There was a graduate fellowship program set up for returned Peace Corps volunteers. So I actually got my master's in public policy, and then actually went on and got another master's in conflict analysis and resolution. And during my second master's is when I really started to feel animated around continuing again this, the trajectory of like peace building, conflict resolution, making things better, working with people to allow full selves to be found and emerge, et cetera. And so that's when I started to really think about using the things that I had learned, that I had done in college and even in high school, drama, theater, art, creation, in combination with conflict analysis and resolution. It was like, how do you do conflict analysis and resolution? You get people together and you create art about things that matter to them. So so actually after my second master's is when it started. And in 2009, I met Chukuma, and we've been at at the creation of TÉA, and I still say it's being created because every day is, part of the journey, but we've been creating TÉA Artistry since 2009 together.
Chuk, do you remember the first conversation about that?
Yeah, definitely. And it felt like the Avengers were being assembled or something.
Nice.
The head of Nightstar at the time, she pulled some of the actors together. She was like, yo, I'm putting together a team. And within Nightstar, and she was like, you're gonna try out this new initiative. And Vieve went by Rada at the time, and she, Rada, y'all know Rada because Rada had visited from time to time. She's like, Rada's putting together a team, wants to start this new initiative, and this is what it's going to be about. And I'm like, yeah, I'm down.
What was your superpower?
You know what? I think writing was a superpower of mine even then.
Yeah.
I really gravitated towards being involved in the writing of that first play that we did.
Yes.
Had you been in other companies, Chuk, before that? Had you been in other collectives that worked in that way, or no?
Not before Nightstar. I mean, I did a whole lot of theater and was part of a whole lot of clubs in college. I was always the type that wanted to try everything. Whether it was student government, fraternity life, sports, and theater. And so like I felt like, trying out different experiences always made it a comfortable transition whenever I was trying something new.
Oh, wow.
And I was into poetry from the time I was a little kid, and so writing wasn't completely alien to me, but like playwriting was relatively new. But I really picked it up really fast and loved it.
So, so when you had that first conversation with Rada about starting TÉA, was it as simple as you write us a play and I'll direct it and these people will act in it, or was there more? What was the process like? I'm curious about that. I feel like oftentimes people skip over that part. They're like, we met, it was a great meeting, and then we were on Broadway, and
Right.
how'd you go from A to L? What was that process like?
Very untraditional. So, we had a devised theater approach where the artists in the room were all like, not even the artist only, but the director, anyone else who was involved, from the very beginning were invested in the creation of the piece. And so, and then even before that, there was this whole period of information gathering. What we would call insight conversations, where we would we chose the topic at the time we wanted to explore, the impacts of 9/11. We were in New York, and it was, even though 2009, it was still very fresh on our minds. And we wanted to explore how the relationship between Muslims and non-Muslims had been shaped up to that point. And so we were talking to Muslims and non-Muslims and asking them how your lives have changed since 9/11, and what's been coming up for you, and where there was still a sense of threat within those relationships. And so we spoke to at least 40 people, probably more. And so that was the research.
Were they chosen for their notoriety? Were they college professors or published authors, or were they people out on the street, or how did you choose those people?
It was definitely a mix. So after the team was assembled and we talked about the goal, at first we just chose people to talk to. In some cases it was family members. In some cases it was the person on the street selling scarves. And then, yes, in some cases it was the police chaplain who was Muslim, or this person, and that's part of academia. So it was a mix, but we really spread it out, and it was a combination of strangers and friends and referrals.
Very interesting. You mentioned a phrase that I want to go back to just for a second. You said it was a combination of the artists in the room. Where was the room? Having lived in New York for a number of years, I know that space can be the hardest thing. I've actually rehearsed plays in parks before, because there was no room.
We have too, yes.
Where was the room?
We wonderfully, at the very beginning, the kind of the nascent time and stages of TÉA, we were associated with and under the umbrella of an organization called Intersections International, and they were a social justice organization with a space on Fifth Avenue in the 1920s. And we collaborated with them, and were sort of their resident theater company, for lack of a better word. And we were part of Fred Johnson's initiative. He was a staff there at Intersections, and he had something called Art at the Intersection. So TÉA is part of Art at the Intersection at Intersections International, and they had space. So we were able to devise and work through and create and rehearse pretty much exclusively at different intersection spaces for those first several years, actually.
Did you just walk in and say, we've got this plan.
I literally walked in. I did, Jerry. I had I was working at Search for Common Ground. That was my internship during my second master's, which is in DC. They too are a social justice organization. And one of the men at Search, I was talking about wanting to do this, combo of theater and art and group devised work and conflict resolution, transformation. And he said, "Oh, you should meet a colleague of mine in New York. His name is Bob Chase." I was living in DC at the time. And so I wrote Bob Chase an email and said, "Can I come talk to you?" And I walked in and I was sitting at a table with Bob Chase and Fred Johnson. And I said, "Here's what I want to do." And to their incredible credit, they said, "Okay."
Yeah.
It was like that. It literally just doesn't happen like that often. And I said, "Oh, okay." So we were with Intersections for several years.
It's something that I think is a shock to the system for a lot of young people. They come out of college and they move to New York, or in some cases, Chuk already live in New York, but suddenly all that infrastructure around them is gone. There isn't a theater, there isn't a rehearsal room, there isn't a green room, there aren't 15 people sitting in the green room waiting to be told what to do next. And you have to make that stuff up. And I think that shock to the system often, causes people to flee, both the city and the industry. And I've always thought that it would be really smart of the people, the government in New York City to create some spaces like that. And, in the way that here in Raleigh, we have Art Space, which is for visual artists, but every 6 months it turns over. There's probably, I don't know, 15 or 20 different studios in that building.
Wow.
And every 6 months it turns over. And so if you're a young visual artist, the possibility of having a place to work exists, and you may not get it this 6 months, but that down the road at some point, if you keep working, you have a good chance of having space. So I think it'd be really smart of the city of New York to make some of that space for all those young people who come to the city and bring with them the hopes and the
absolutely
talent, the brain.
Yeah. Yes.
Of course, if they do it, they'll leave Raleigh, and then I'll be screwed.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that's the point though, Jerry. I think a lot of people who come to New York with an expectation of just being this actor, and then they find that it's not so easy. I think it's for folks like that, it could be hard to grasp alternative routes to creating the kind of art you want to create. And so I think the fact that I was in a company like Nightstar that was really encouraging you to put on different hats was really helpful for me in being able to settle as an artist in the city. And then, you do see some organizations that try to make that kind of space for artists, like organizations like Art New York that provide subsidized space, or like Fractured Atlas that offer like fiscal sponsorships for people who want to be, to put on a bit of an entrepreneurial hat and not just be an actor, but also be like a generative artist and like create. But, you have to be willing to step into that kind of territory and cross that threshold of just being an actor. If you just want to be an actor, power to you, but it is very hard to do that.
When I left New York in '96, there was an article that year in the New York Times that had done a survey of actors in New York and found that year there had been 78 actors who made a living, as an actor in New York City. And that doesn't mean somebody who got a 1 month run at a off-Broadway theater, a 6-week run or something like that, but people who actually were able to only work as an actor in the city that year.
78.
I think it was 78, or 82 or something like that. It was well under 100. And that doesn't take into account all the ones who go out into regional theaters and stuff, or the ones who go make a movie and make $20,000 or $30,000 off of that and live off of it for the year. But just the ones, back then it was people like you know, what's her name? CJ from The West Wing, I can't,
Allison Janney.
Allison Janney, yeah, or Nathan Lane, those were the people we're talking about. And, but there were, every year there's something like 100,000 actors who move to New York City and a similar number who leave each year. And it can be a demoralizing thing.
Yeah.
But I do think that idea of making your own work and finding your own spaces is something that ought to be taught.
Yes.
There ought to be a major in producing, but I know of one. I don't know. Maybe there's one out there somewhere, but anyway, so we're a little bit off the track. I wanted to talk particularly about Being Chaka. That came up. Chuk, were you involved in the writing of that script originally? You were one of the authors. Did you do a first draft and then bring other people in, or did the three authors of it? Did you all work together from the start, or how did that happen?
Yeah. So there was a creative team of about 5 of us, and of the 5 of us, 3 of us emerged as the writers, which was me, Tara, and Nalini. And but yeah, we were at it from the beginning. But that was also part of a larger process that started like in 2019, like something like that, where we called it like the Weaver Initiative, and we were starting. Similarly to what we did when TÉA first started with that first play. We knew that Vieve and I knew that we wanted to create a piece around race as experienced through a human lens in this country. And so at that time, we put together a company that began a TÉA process. We were having insight conversations with folks, mostly in New York, but also like here in North Carolina, other parts of the country even. So we started doing all that back in 2019. That kind of led us to a play called The Weaver that we put up in, I think, 2021, during the pandemic. And then that led to a second play called The Weaver Part 2 Paradigm, which we did at the New Ohio Theater in New York as part of an artist residency that we were awarded from them. It was a 2-year residency. And the first year was the creation of The Weaver Part 2. And in the the second year of that residency, that was going to be our culminating play. We didn't know what the title was going to be, but it was like, all right, all this work that we did with The Weaver and The Weaver Part 2 is going to lead to this.
Yeah.
And it was for that we, at that point, we had Tara, we had Nalini, it was me, Vieve, we had
Talia.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And so with the 5 of us, we said, all right, let's create this culminating piece. And it was during the writing of it. I think it was Nalini's idea. She goes, yeah, we should call it Being Chaka.
It was actually our idea, Chukuma. I have to stop you.
Oh, was it?
Yes, it was our idea. I only have to do that and interrupt you because I remember sitting at my dining room table and we had to have a name for the piece for New Ohio. Because they were like, we got to have the title of this piece that you're creating. What is this piece called? And you and I were talking about becoming Chaka. We knew we wanted it to be Chaka because that had emerged as our main character. And so it was like, what? And it was you and me. I must say, it was us, you and I, you and me.
Oh, wow.
Who said Being Chaka. I
know,
don't give that credit away.
Isn't memory a wonderful thing?
Yes, it is a wonderful selective thing. Although I'm right in this one, I'm right. And I do, to piggyback on what Chukuma was saying, it really, a TÉA piece emerges from a TÉA process, as Chuk was saying. And so the process itself, again, we spend a lot of time in discovery. And so we call it critical discovering. But this is where we have all the insight conversations. And as Chuk was referencing, we even came down, 3 of us, Nabil, who was part of the team at the beginning, me and Chukuma, came down to North Carolina, stayed with my dad, and had like 15 insight conversations down here. So the voice of North Carolina is even, it's fun to say, right? It's fun to think about that some of those voices are in, and it really shaped our piece that we're now bringing back down here, thanks to you and Burning Coal, and able to do Being Chaka down here. So it was such a iterative process of gathering all of these stories and then having our own. At the time we were 5, we then had 8 company members, then we were bringing in other company members. But we had a whole period, which we call creative exploration, in which we were then taking all of the inside conversations that we had had and responding ourselves and together, right,
Yeah.
to the themes that had come up, to the stories that had come up, all confidential, but still like really taking it very seriously of what. So we just had an inside conversation, let's say with Jane, whoever that might be, with the things that Jane was saying. Where does that strike you? What's your take on that? What's your felt response to that? How now are you thinking about something? So it was all very creative and collaborative. And the thing that's cool is, as Chuk was saying, the Weaver we started out with 6 characters. And almost, I think every one of our pieces maintained in some way or another elements, the character, or if not the character, elements of that character. So all of the characters most of the characters in Being Chaka had kind of emerged from the very early times, and some of them, morphed into something different. Some of them took on, characteristics of a different character, and then they became a composite. So it's been a really fun process to find this piece.
I think for many laymen and possibly even the person you're talking to right now, the process is only mystifying in that final stage between discovering ideas and editing ideas. I'm imagining a moment where I had a moment as an actor in my life when I was working with a director who was very open to ideas. And one day my character walked on stage and started shouting something that I felt was very appropriate for the moment. And he pulled me aside and said, "No, don't say that." That's editing. That is one person driving the car. And I'm not suggesting he was or wasn't right about that moment, but I'm curious to know if in the TÉA Artistry method, if there is that person in place, and if not, how do you refine a piece, or do you refine a piece?
Well, I will say, and then I think Chuk, you and I should share this. The other activity in our process is called aesthetic expressing, right? Aesthetically expressing or artistically expressing. And that is what you're exactly talking about, Jerry. It's like taking all the discoveries and all the exploration and saying, okay, now what is the piece? And it's hard. I mean, it's hard because you can't. Wonderful to have 12 people in the company, wonderful to have all these inside conversations, wonderful. And yet, yes, so at some point there needs to be the culling, creating
sifting.
the sifting, the culling, and so what Chuk was referring to is that from all these people and from all this work, we did have a creative team of 5. And that was our job together, is to really say, what have we done? What do we have? What are we trying to say? And also using insight artistry, which is our method, right? So we really attend to, is it so that this piece is spiritually grounded? Is it so that this piece is speaking to some kind of, and I'm going to use transcending with a small t, but like our intention is to create work that asks people to lean in, asks people to be curious, asks people to wonder, doesn't tell people what to think, right? Doesn't shame people.
But there's still ego. There's still individual ego, isn't there?
There is, and then I would say from that 5 of us working, that Chuk and Nalini and Tara emerged as the key main writers, and then even between the 3 of them you have to work on how do you co-write, right? And Chukuma, you can take over from here since you're in that room.
Like, Chuk, have you ever had something go on stage that you as an artist didn't believe in, but you felt you had to let it happen because one of the other people did? You had to trust them, I guess, in that way, or is there a way to make sure that all of you have finally agree on the final product, I guess?
Generally speaking, yes. And I'm not talking about within TÉA, but generally speaking, I've been part of collaborative processes where I felt like, man, I don't know if I'm really being authentically represented as a collaborator here. Like I don't even know if I want to keep my name on that, you know? So I think what we had to do, to make sure that we were constantly on the same page. And this is like language that we use today, but we didn't actually use this terminology back then. It was like we had to like just always figure out what our North Star was, and then we had to keep checking in. And we literally did that. Like we would have an outlining session, and then at the end of the session, the three of us would be like, all right, are we doing what we set out to do? You know, like, is it meeting that like goal that we kind of like literally wrote down?
Like
and
a mission
so,
statement.
yeah, like a mission statement, you know? And so we felt like it was important to have one, and we felt like it was important to keep checking in that we were all aligned with that intention. And sometimes, you know, we would really want something, but it wouldn't really be aligned with that intention. Maybe it was because we thought it was cool. And so then we had to negotiate, like, can we do without this? And if we could, you know, and it could be hard. It could be hard. It's definitely hard sometimes.
That's a great question to ask for artists to ask themselves, especially writers. Can we do without this?
Yes, exactly. And we kept doing it so then the five of us would gather and do that all again, right? So the three writers would do it and then come back, and Talia and I, my God, this one trips me up every time. But I would that we would then, the five of us, say, is this aligned with the insight art that we want to create? Is this aligned with art that is healing rather than destructive? Is this aligned with what it is that we want to say about the personal dynamics of race, or is it not? Is it speaking to the systemic racism in a way that really can open up the possibility for change, or keep the status quo, right? And it just mattered so much to keep checking in, to keep attending to, as Chuk said, our North Star for the insight art we wanted to create.
We've gone well over my 25 to 30 minutes estimate. I wanted to ask each of you, if you had to give an elevator speech on what Chaka is about, and who Chaka is, you know, how would you define that, for not to give away plot points or anything, but how would you define that?
You know, I would say that this play is a coming of age story about a teenager that has to contend with grief, with learning about systemic racism, and with trying to fit in, and having those issues all overlap and intertwine, and impact not just him but those around him.
Yeah, I would, and the only piece to add to that, I think, is, you know, it's a piece about being, and, you know, being includes where have you come from. So it has a lot. There's a deep thread of what is your history, who gets to say, who gets to say who you become, who gets to say who you know, the beingness of the character. And a lot of characters also are, you know, it could be called being Kunzang as well. Could be called being Maddie as well. So a lot of characters go through similar journeys, we're not quite targeting the way that we do with Chaka, but it's for everyone in the piece, and then hopefully for audiences to question, like, who is it that I want to be? And do I get to say, right?
Well, Being Chaka, presented at Burning Coal by TÉA Artistry, is opening on March 13th, and will be playing through the 30th of March. Tickets are available at burningcoal.org. And we very much look forward to opening night, which is now just over a week away. And I guess I will see you all at the designer run on Thursday, if not before.
Very good. Jerry, thank you so much for this opportunity and also for this opportunity, the opportunity to bring Being Chaka here, to do it now, right? And you added a fifth show. You believed in it and added a fifth main stage show, which was a real stretch, I think, for you in some ways, and hopefully a real positive one.
I love doing new things and with new people for us, and this seemed like it checked off both of those boxes. And then when I read it and saw the video, I thought, well, okay, we're going to do that. So good guys. Thank you both.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Take care.